So I'm working with a 2-screen setup today. So my camera is on one and everybody's faces are on one and my presentation's on the other. So I won't necessarily be looking at the screen the whole time. But all right, let's get this started. So as Cami mentioned, when she introduced us earlier, we run the WordPress Fundamentals meetup. So this presentation is very typical of what we go over in our meetup, which means that it's ground level stuff. If for the professionals in the audience, this is all stuff you already know, and it's aimed at folks that don't code, that just like, so I'm going to be skipping over some of the more technical stuff. There's some other stuff that I might like mention in passing that like, if you're a pro, then you're gonna be like, well, it's more complicated than that. And I know, I'm also a pro, I know. That's not who this is aimed at, all right? So I just wanted to put that caveat out there because that is generally understood when I'm giving this presentation. So, all right. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so we didn't have time to get like really fancy with it, so we just used the standard slide deck. But so this is the presentation for WordPress Fundamentals, and today we're going to be going over how to back up your WordPress website. And the reason why we called it Do This First is because before you do anything, you want to do your backups. Before you take your updates, before you make major changes, before you want to make sure that your stuff is safe. It's exactly the same idea as if you are working on a Word document or any sort of, if you play games at all, you know this, you gotta save your data in case something happens so that you can go back to the version where you saved it and basically undo whatever mistake happened. So you need a backup for your website specifically in case the server fails. The server is where your website lives. It's a special kind of computer that stays on all the time so that people can always access your website. Like that's what you're paying your host for, is to keep the lights on. And the thing is that if you keep a computer on 24/7, it is eventually going to break. Part of why hosting costs what it does is because of the electricity, and part of it is because they have to keep people on staff for when the computers break so they can swap them out. All right, so sooner or later the server does fail, and because there are so many people working on it, usually the lights stay on and things stay okay. Like they ain't, they're always aiming for more than 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time it's gonna get you, right? So server failure, hacking or malware attack, this is a lot more common, especially in WordPress. WordPress is one of, I would say, actually probably the most popular way to make a website in the world right now, because judging by the data we've got, we are almost like WordPress is being used to create almost half of the world's websites in existence, which is a number that humans cannot truly comprehend. Like it's in the trillions. It's not a real number. There are more websites than humans. Like it's ridiculous. And so like 45, I haven't looked it up recently, it keeps going up, the percentage keeps going up. But anyway, there's a lot of WordPress out there, and as such, it's a nice big juicy target for hackers. And there is no perfect security, there is no perfect website security in particular, because the game keeps changing. It's just, I'm not even going to get into security today. But sooner or later you will get hacked. Sooner or later there will be a problem, and the easiest way to deal with it, honestly, is to just go back in time to before there was a problem and restore your data from the copy that the hackers didn't get, and then take your security updates that have come out in the meantime and go on from there. Theme or plugin update issues. I'm not going to go into it today, but usually I do make sure that people know what themes and plugins are. Basically, it's it's basically the software that sits on top of WordPress that lets your website do stuff. The thing is that themes and plugins are all built by different people who don't talk to each other, and so it's really easy for them to make updates that ruin somebody else's day. Sometimes also mistakes happen, and an update comes out and it doesn't work right, or just mistakes happen. They just do. So undo the mistake, take it back. Same thing with user errors. If something really awful happens to your website, if you're dealing with a multi-person team and somebody makes a mistake that can't be fixed, the way to fix it is to roll back to your last save, to go back to your backup. So what's in the backup? Your site, basically. So WordPress is software that allows you to make a website, and your website, the nuts and bolts, like what it is underneath, is the stuff that gets added to the WordPress software to make it your site instead of somebody else's. And it's made up of a bunch of different pieces. So your database is where all of your text lives. Like if you ever, like, there's an actual text file that you can make of your database, and if you go and if you go and dig through it, in all of the jumble of code, you will eventually find all of the things that you've written in your posts and your pages and stuff. There's also the settings for your themes and your plugins and everything. Like that's where that stuff is kept. Comments, which is also a type of also a type of text. Basically, all of that stuff lives in the database. Sometimes there's more stuff, but that's like the important stuff. The files, everything you've uploaded to the site, and that which technically includes your theme and plugin code. Sorry, I live on a major arterial. So your themes and your plugins, those are also software that live on top of WordPress, but that code, your copy of it is on your website, is on your server, on your piece of the server usually. But anyway, so all of those things together make your website, plus the WordPress core. Like, you have to have all of those things together in order for your website to work. It's why you can't just take your stuff and throw it somewhere else and expect it to work without the underlying software. It's why themes have to be inside of WordPress. Plugins have to be inside of WordPress. Like, they all connect and depend on the underlying software. But you can move from one WordPress installation to another if you have all of these things, right? Like, in any case, right. Where does the backup go? It could go a bunch of different places. So the default is actually just your web host. Like, if you are just like, if your host is taking backups, or you're taking these two slides are in the wrong order. This is in the wrong place. Who backs up a WordPress site? Your host can back up a WordPress site. This is usually either if you're on value hosting, if you're paying less than $10 a month for your hosting, then your host is taking backups in order to cover their own butt, not yours. Okay, so they probably only keep like a month worth of data. They might only keep your database and not your files. Like, even if they say they take backups, I wouldn't necessarily trust them. If you have managed WordPress hosting, which is usually more expensive, sometimes it has its own fancy interface, it usually has better customer service, things like WP Engine, they are what's known as managed WordPress hosting. You can, and if it is a good host, then you can trust their backups. I am very paranoid about backups personally, so I don't usually trust, like, WP Engine is like the one host that I trust, and even them, I'm like, I'm also going to take my own backups. It's because and the thing is that you don't have to only have one source of backups. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So your host can take it, your IT or developer can take it. If you're working, if you're familiar with other ways of making websites other than WordPress, you know, you can do all sorts of stuff with shell scripts and, you know, whatever. But if you're just a user on the day-to-day basis, you know, you're probably asking somebody else to do it for you. But the thing about WordPress is that it puts the power in the hands of the user, and you can take your own backups. And you should. So I'm going to show you how. So where does the backup go? If your host takes it, it's on your web host. If you take it and you don't set up other backups, it's on your server. You can also download it and have it on your personal computer or your personal external storage, stuff like that. Or it can be in the cloud. Now, the cloud, if you don't know, is actually just more computers. It's just more servers. It's just more hosting. It's just more 24/7 computers that are on. That's all it is. Anyway, it's just specifically set up for storage instead of for making a website go. All right. So, generally speaking, I recommend doing all three of these at once, because like there's a saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none. If you don't have backups of the backup, then it's like you have no backup at all. So generally speaking, you want to have like a pure backup, like one that you know is clean and pristine and has the most important information in your personal computer storage. And then you want most of your backups in the cloud, and maybe, and like, personally, I wouldn't actually keep any on the web host because that increases your storage and nobody needs that. Like, that's not really what your web host is for. Your web host is for your website, and then you want to put your storage somewhere else. That's why the cloud started existing in the first place, because people were like, I need more storage, but having it just be on the web host kind of stinks. So anyway, because these slides are out of order, I need to switch it around a little bit. Hold on. Why, what, where, how? Okay, so yeah. So technically, if you know what you're doing, you can do, you can just, there are programs that you can use to just visit the server directly instead of going to it through your browser, and thereby get at the files and just pull them off of the computer and put them on your computer. You can just do it that way. And again, you know, there's the bash scripts or whatever, so you can do it automatically if you really want to. I don't recommend it. You can have your web host do it. Again, the managed WordPress hosting, if that is usually a service that they offer. That is the sort of thing that if you're paying for it, I would test it, make sure that it works. There are some hosts who offer managed WordPress hosting that I don't trust to do backups correctly, because I have tested them and they don't do it correctly. But whatever. But then there's the WordPress plugin option. So the thing is that these work at different levels of your website. Your website is made up of a bunch of different layers of technology, and doing it from the WordPress plugin level is like kind of the topmost layer, which can cause problems, but most of the time it's not. But so like what I'm showing you is going to work for most people, but occasionally might not work for everybody, because there's so many layers of abstraction. But again, that's like another comment kind of to the professionals in the room, just to reassure you that I do know what I'm talking about. I'm just keeping it simple. Okay, so all right, so now when did I start? How many? I don't know. I forgot to start my timer. I'm sorry. But now we're going to watch a video that I pre-recorded because I wanted to not make you sit here and wait for things to load, and also, that way if there was any issues. Anyway, I didn't want to try to do this live in front of a bunch of people. So let me, oh shoot, I need to set this up so that you actually get my
Ash, to
audio.
answer your question, you have about 5 more minutes. I don't know how long the
Oh my
video is.
gosh. The minute is 13.
Um, well, we saved a little time with Kimberly, and would that be the end of your talk?
It is the end of my
Yeah,
talk.
let's go ahead and show it. That's fine. We'll
Okay.
adjust.
I'm sorry. I talked as fast as I could. Okay, let me. Sorry. Sorry. So
to install a backup plugin on your
can you
WordPress
hear
site.
that?
This is really important because
Okay.
backups keep your data safe. It keeps you.
I'm just gonna fast forward a little bit because I
the
think I
address of your website and then adding
double
you can do by
covered a couple things. Okay.
putting in the address of your website and then adding /login onto the end of it. This usually works, as with many things in WordPress. Caveat, of course, that it can be different if a developer's gotten in there and changed things. But if that's the case, you should have other ways to log in. Now, you can see, now that I've logged in, that I have some updates. I'm actually behind a version on WordPress. So it's definitely time to run some updates. And before you run updates, you always want to back up your site in case something goes wrong when you run the updates, because code is not perfect and sometimes there can be a problem. So what we're going to want to do here is come here and install the backup plugin. Today we're going to use Updraft Plus. That's the backup plugin that I personally recommend. Other developers have other favorites. I like Updraft because it is really easy to use. Even if you aren't a developer, you can use it from the WordPress interface, and it works with pretty much every cloud storage option out there. So in order to install it on this demo site here, I'm going to search for Updraft, hit enter. And here's the one that you want, Updraft Plus WordPress Backup Plugin. So this is the one that we want. So click on Install Now. Okay, and now it's installed. However, all that means is that the files that make up the plugin have been downloaded onto the computer where the rest of your website files are. It's not actually going to do anything until you press Activate. If you do that, okay, so now the plugin is activated. Now, what's changed? What's changed is there is now a menu up here for Updraft Plus. When you add plugins to your site, they usually add something to your menu, either on the left or across the top, sometimes both. In the case of this optimizer plugin I have, they'll often add something to either tools or settings in this case. So there's a lot of different ways to interact with your plugin once you've installed it. You can get to the settings from your plugins page. You can get to it from the Updraft Plus menu, etc. Something I will note, I am demonstrating the free version of Updraft. I really like the paid version. I use it with my clients. I think it's important to pay for the plugins that you like, that you use, because that's what allows the developer to continue to support the plugin and update the plugin. But I'm not showing you how to pay for the plugin today, so I'll go ahead and dismiss that. How often you back up and how many backups you keep is something that everybody kind of has to decide for themselves based on how much storage space they have, how often they're making changes, and how much they're willing to manage their backups. I would say that weekly and keeping 10 backups is a pretty reasonable kind of middle of the road place to be. However, you are always going to want to run a backup before you run your updates, but that'll be a manual update, which we'll go over in a minute. Once you figured out how often you're going to back up and how many of your backups you're going to keep, you need to decide where that's going to go. For folks just getting started, I generally recommend Google Drive just because it's free and most people already have a Google account. So that's what I'll go ahead and show you how to set up. So once you've chosen your remote storage, then you're going to want to scroll all the way down to the bottom. You don't need to worry about any of this stuff for now. It's always something you can come back and start to get interested in later, but the defaults are pretty much fine for most people. And then say save changes. And once you've done that, what you'll want to do is follow these instructions. After you have saved your settings, come back here and follow this link to complete authentication with Google Drive. So you click on it, it'll think for a minute, it'll ask you to sign in. You can choose your account, tell it to allow. Then you'll see this screen. And then you hit complete setup. All right, and you're all set. See here, successfully authenticated. And we're not going up to premium today, so we'll just dismiss that. All right, so we want to get these updates done. It really wants us to update the WordPress core, so we gotta get on that. So the next thing to do is hit backup now. We're gonna say backup now. Don't worry about any of the settings. The defaults should be just fine. Okay, great. Now, when you run your backup, things don't go quite right, then that's the point at which you can start messing with all of the settings and things and try to figure out what's going on. But most of the time, the defaults are going to do just fine. So you can see now the backup apparently succeeded and is now complete. And if we scroll down, this is today. This is the time. There we go. So the next thing to do then is run the updates. There we go. That's all set. Go back to updates. Okay, 2021 needs an update. Go ahead. Okay. Now I'm running through updates very quickly because this presentation isn't about taking your updates, but I will note that it's actually not recommended to update all of your plugins at once like that. It's lower risk to do them one by one and make sure nothing went wrong while you were running the update. I went ahead and did all of those because I know every plugin on this site and it's fine. You can see here it's telling you to back up before you run the update. All right, 5.7.2. So everything seems to be okay. You always want to make sure, check your site and make sure nothing weird is going on, nothing broke, because plugins are all written by different authors and they don't check in with each other and they can step on each other's toes. Now, I happen to be very familiar with all of these plugins, and so I felt comfortable running updates on them all at once, but you might not want to. You might want to do them one at a time. And also, if you run into a problem, that's also something you'll need to do. So if I did run updates and I found something had gone wrong, what I need to do is go back to Updraft, come down to my backup, and say restore. While technically you can decide to restore only part of a backup, I would recommend that unless you know what you're doing, just do the whole thing at once. So now it's bringing the files back from Google Drive, where it sent them before. All right, there we go. It's all ready to be restored. Again, there's more options if you know what you're doing, but the default is really all you need most of the time. So go ahead and hit restore. Now, this one did not need to be sped up. That was the actual speed. Once you've actually got things in place, it's usually pretty quick. It's just the re-downloading all the files that takes some time. Okay, and now the backup's been restored, and you can see we've got updates. Now, you'll notice that the version of WordPress didn't roll back, and that's because the backup did not include WordPress core. did not include the base WordPress software. It just included the stuff that we put in on top of it. So the free version of the backup plugin does not allow you to back up the core, which is fine because most of the time you don't need it. But if you're ever worried about that happening, if you have an unusual plugin, if you have a custom plugin, if you have a situation where changing WordPress versions could be really bad for you, then you'll probably want the pro version and to back up the core as well before you run updates. But for most people, most of the time, not going to be a worry. So you can see we've got the old version of these plugins back, got the old version of the theme back. If there was something wrong, it'll have been undone. It'll have been as if nothing ever happened. Now, this does also go for any posts you updated, any pages you changed, any customizations you might have done. All of that stuff is also undone. So do be careful if you're rolling back changes, but you didn't do it right away, because you'll lose whatever you did in the meantime as well. Okay, that's today's presentation. Thanks for listening. The version that happens at the meetup is usually a bit more rambly than this. I tried to keep it short so we don't have a lot of time. And you have a lot of other meetups to meet today. So anyway, I hope this was useful to you and have a great day.
Dash, thank you so much.